Hello and welcome to the 49ers Plus podcast. I'm Al Moriello, and this is your source for the most objective 49ers discussion and analysis. And today we're going to be discussing more Brock Purdy upcoming contract nonsense from people who don't realize the market or what Purdy is actually worth. I'm going to compare Purdy to four quarterbacks who are averaging $50 million per season so everyone can see what Brock Purdy is worth and why he is in the ballpark. We're going to be discussing injuries, injury updates for the team. And then I wanted to compare the COVID year, which was a complete disaster, 2020, to how injuries, prominent players being injured, number of games missed compares to this year. And it's a lot closer than you may think. We're going to go over some news, notes, and statistics for the team before we get into the 49ers-Bills preview. And this has the very real potential of being another ugly game like at Green Bay this past Sunday. So without further ado, let's get into it. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone. I am recording this on Thanksgiving night. If you are listening today or in the coming days, I hope you and your family had a wonderful, restful, and food-filled Thanksgiving. And real quickly, the only game I was able to see before I started recording was the Chicago Bears and Matt Eberflus. Ridiculous clock management. Should have taken a timeout after Caleb Williams got sacked. Did not. Bears are in free fall. Now they've lost, 6 straight. And Eberflus should be fired on the plane ride back to Chicago. But let's get into Niners news. So Daniel Jones, former quarterback of the New York Giants, who was released, signs with the Minnesota Vikings. There was rumblings and media speculation that the 49ers would be one of the preferred destinations for Daniel Jones. Instead, he's going to Minnesota with Kevin O'Connell to learn behind another New York quarterback in Sam Darnold. J.J. McCarthy is on IR with the knee tear, and Nick Mullins is the backup. So Daniel Jones will be the number 3 emergency quarterback for the foreseeable future. In terms of the Niners having interest, yes, that was confirmed. And Kyle Shanahan came out today, and here was his quote. "We discussed it. Yep, that's about it." So that's the extent of at least what we know in terms of, did they offer him a contract? Was there a conversation? Did they just discuss it internally? Who knows? What we do know, at least based on social media, is that far too many fans were on the Daniel Jones bandwagon. And I can't really figure out why. His first season in New York was the best. That was the only season, I believe, where he threw more than 20 touchdowns. He has been bitten by the injury bug, which means he would fit right in well with the 49ers team historically, but especially this year. But what has he shown you recently that has made anybody think that he is a viable option for anything? Maybe as a backup, right? But there are people out there that really thought he's a viable option to Brock Purdy next year, that you don't pay Purdy. You let him play out his 4th year. Maybe there's a competition with Daniel Jones. These are the people, again, that either are Brock Purdy haters or they are enamored with size, speed, arm strength measurables. And I've said it before, and I'm going to keep saying it. All that stuff, all that potential talent, that strong arm, being able to run, throw it 55, 60 yards on a rope, all that stuff in 50 cents will get you a child-sized bag of chips. If you don't have it between the ears, if you don't have pocket presence, awareness, accuracy, anticipation, especially in a Kyle Shanahan timing offense, it's not going to matter. But fans not only thought that Daniel Jones, some fans, not a lot, some fans, not only thought that he could be a long-term replacement for Brock Purdy, but thought that he could be an immediate replacement if Brock Purdy's shoulder doesn't respond and if he's out, say, the remainder of the year. But again, remember, Kyle Shanahan's offense is not easy. He is not going to pick it up on when would he have been signed? I guess yesterday. I mean, he never would have been able to play this upcoming week. Plus, Brandon Allen, Jesus Christ, is going to start again over Josh Dobbs if Brock is unable to go, and I don't think he's going to be able to go. Daniel Jones would not be functional for a month plus in this offense. And by that time, it'll be week 16 or 17. The season will basically be over. People just need to stop and use their heads a little bit before saying ridiculous things. Now, I was on record saying it only made sense to me if the Niners, if Kyle and John and the offensive staff really liked him in terms of being a backup beyond this year if they sign Daniel Jones to a 2-year deal. Otherwise, it didn't make much sense outside of the compensatory pick, but I'm not sure what type of pick they're going to get for Daniel Jones because he's not going to sign a humongous contract. He would get probably the contract that Sam Darnold got from Minnesota, right? A 1-year, $10 million prove it type of deal. But at least he ends up in a better spot now in Minnesota that if the Vikings decide not to re-sign Darnold, and someone's going to give Darnold way too much money when he becomes a free agent, if the Vikings don't sign him before he gets to free agency, which is a 50-50 possibility. He's having a very good year, perhaps a Pro Bowl caliber year in the NFC, if the Pro Bowl actually mattered, if at least the Pro Bowl games actually mattered anymore. But someone might be giving him $35-40 million a year for one good season in the NFL, right? Every coach thinks I could be the one to unlock the talent. I'll be the one to figure it out. And maybe it was Kevin O'Connell with the years under Sam Darnold's belt, sitting for a year in San Francisco, being able to get his bearings and learn in a good offense from a bright offensive mind like Kyle Shanahan, and now playing in a situation with Kevin O'Connell, having, TJ Hawkinson has only been available for the past couple of weeks, but a very good tight end, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, having a running game with Aaron Jones, a good aggressive defense that keeps them in basically all of their games. He's not going to have that elsewhere because the teams that are going to need a quarterback are going to be garbage teams like the Raiders, like the Giants. Not that he would go back to the Jets. Does Tennessee need a quarterback? These are just teams that are going nowhere, and Sam Darnold will revert back to form. Maybe a compensatory pick is like a 5th or 6th rounder, and you sign Daniel Jones and you get a 5th rounder in return just for him being on the roster for 5 or 6 weeks. That's not a bad thing, but I also wouldn't want to eat however much money it's going to take for Daniel Jones to be the emergency third quarterback that's going to be inactive on game days because he's so far behind Brandon Allen and Josh Dobbs. If you want to have the conversation like in time, when he gets up to speed with the offense, is he a better quarterback option than Dobbs or Allen? Yeah, you could have that conversation and argument about that. But to me, it was never a realistic factor. And of course, social media is not truly representative of either what's going to happen, what the Niners are going to do, because most of the time folks are way, way off, especially fans. Some of the media folks have their fair share of hits. I'm not media, but myself included, I have a pretty decent batting average. But what this led into, and I'm not going to use the TWA word today. We'll just say Twitter morons because it is Thanksgiving. So I'm trying to be a little bit more optimistic, but I am thankful for the morons on social media. I'm thankful for a lot of things in life: family, friends, good health, job security, all the stuff that a lot of people are thankful for. But in terms of having a podcast, I am thankful for the abundance of idiots and bad takes on social media because it gives me something to talk about. And if you guys haven't seen these or not heard the exact tweets or read the exact tweets I'm about to read to you, but if you've been on social media and you know how toxic 49er Twitter is in terms of just everything's doom and gloom, they can't lose a game, they can't have a bad season, they can't have a bad quarter until teams are just asking for folks to be benched or fired or whatever. More Brock nonsense as it pertains to his contract. And this was 2 in a thread that I decided to respond to because, as I've said before, I am oppositional defiant to stupid. And I don't think it's my life's mission to educate the dumb when it comes to 49er stuff or just dumb people in general. It would be an impossible mission given the sheer number of morons, no matter how much you lay your case out on social media, obviously, right? With statistics, with facts, with proof, not just conjecture, with comparing to other quarterbacks, which we're going to do in a couple minutes. It doesn't matter. People are going to have their opinion and they're going to think their opinion is right, but I'm not one that respects others' opinions just because they have one. I've said it before, and it might have been on another podcast. There are far too many people out there that have the opinion that the earth is flat. Do we need to respect that opinion, or can we mock it as it rightfully should be mocked? And there's a lot of opinions out there about Brock's contract that I feel like needs to be mocked, specifically because of how dumb and how off these people are. Now, if there are some people that just don't like Brock for whatever reason or want a big athletic Josh Allen type of quarterback, fine. But what you have in Brock is a top 7, top 8 to top 13 quarterback in the league, which means a top 7 or 8 to top 13 quarterback on the planet. You don't let that go. And I don't want to, all the excuses of, well, if Joe Burrow was in San Francisco or this player or that player, well, they're not going to be. Brock is the player in San Francisco. Brock is the one that has taken Shanahan's offense in San Francisco last year to a level that it hadn't reached at all, or an offense in general that the 49ers have attained that they haven't seen probably since the likes of Jeff Garcia or Steve Young. But here's the first quote by someone who does not really understand the market, contract negotiations, or comparable contracts. Quote, Trevor Lawrence was first overall. Tua was 5th. Jordan Love was 26th. Purdy was 242nd overall. Draft pick matters. Brock isn't worth 50 plus million per year. Brock's a $25 million a year quarterback. He should be offered 3 years at $25 million per year, fully guaranteed. And then that was followed up with another brainchild who's dumb, just not as dumb as the quote I just read. Here's the second quote. Quote, I was thinking more like $35 to $40 million a year. Okay. I said this last podcast, and if you did not listen, that's totally okay. If you're joining us now, I greatly appreciate it. And you're one of, or many of the people that I'm thankful for that tunes in sporadically or every week. Extremely, extremely grateful for that. But what I had said, and it might have been last week on this podcast or another show that I do Monday night with a couple buddies, you're going to offer Brock Purdy, Pro Bowl quarterback last year, MVP finalist, put up the best statistical year in 49ers history, who's had some pretty damn good quarterbacks in its day. And it was only in 16 games that Brock played. It's not like he got an extra game to pad his stats. Most yards in 49er history. You're going to offer him a contract that's less than Daniel Jones, what Daniel Jones got offered. And if you're talking about the first one, $25 million a year, if you were Brock Purdy or Brock Purdy's agent and the 49ers or another team, and it's not even Brock Purdy, say a different quarterback that put up the same exact stats, went to a Super Bowl, MVP finals, everything that Brock Purdy did last year, won however many games in a row his rookie year before only losing, we would like to think, because his elbow got blown out in the championship game in Philadelphia, although I did pick the Eagles to win that game regardless, that you would offer that caliber of player $15 million less per year than what Daniel Jones got. If you were Brock or his agent, you would laugh that person who offered that contract out of the room. You would tell them to go fuck themselves. You would probably flip them off. You might not even return their calls and just not want to negotiate anymore because you're so insulted by that offer. And the person that upped the offer to $35 to $40 million a year, the argument still remains the same. You think someone with Brock's credentials is worth right around or 10% less than what Daniel Jones got? And the argument about, well, that was a bad contract, they never should have offered that for Daniel Jones. Just because the Giants offered whatever to Daniel Jones doesn't mean the Niners have to offer the same amount to Brock Purdy, but it does, because he's a data point now. Daniel Jones' contract is a data point, just like Deshaun Watson's. As terrible as that contract was by the Browns, the first ever fully guaranteed contract, if you're taking rookie first rounders out of the equation, because now their entire contract is guaranteed per the last CBA. That's a data point. Dak Prescott making $60 million a year is a data point that I'm sure his agents are going to look at and point to. Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes making mid-40s is a data point, and they are paid low. If Dak Prescott's making $60 million, they should be making $70-75 million a year, right? But they signed their contract a few years earlier, and the market has gone up. I'm on record as saying, and I firmly believe this, just because you're next to get paid does not mean you should get paid the most. The Brandon Ayuk contract was a tricky situation. He got paid like a top 5 wide receiver. He's not a top 5 wide receiver. I don't think the Niners were stuck, but I can understand Ayuk's stance, and I can understand the team that they wanted to give him less. If there was reports that they offered him $25 or $26 million a year back in April or May, whatever it was, I thought a fair amount for him would have been $28.5 million a year, because it would have come just above Jalen Waddle, who's making $28.25 million a year annually. And he had a very comparable, if not slightly better season. He's not a Tyreek Hill. He's not a Justin Jefferson. He's not, to me, an Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's not an A.J. Brown, but he got paid right below that first tier of receivers. And sometimes you get what the market dictates you should be getting. Now, if he had gotten $28.5 million, what am I going to pat myself on the shoulder like, oh, see, I was right? What's $1.5 million a year in the grand scheme of an NFL team salary cap? It's not going to sink the Niners team at all. But the Ayuk negotiation, Bosa got top of the market, the year before that, coming off of his Defensive Player of the Year award. It is timing, productivity, and seeing where the market's at and who got paid what. So anybody out there, I'm going to pull up something that I prepared. It's color-coded per team. Hopefully that doesn't give anybody a seizure or a headache or anything, just to show everybody out there why Brock Purdy is going to be worth $50 million a year. Now, of course, I thought I had everything pulled up already, but let me find it. Now I just found it. So let's start talking about it. And let me go like this so it gets a little bit bigger. This is stats from Pro Football Reference as of, going into week 12 or 13, whatever it is. This week is week 13. So through 12 weeks of this season, plus their careers. And I'm not going to read everything off to you. And if you guys want to pause this and just take in the stats and numbers yourselves, obviously feel free. The benefit of doing that is you don't get to hear my voice, which is very monotone at times. But since Brock Purdy's come into the league, let's at least read his, right? He's played in 31 regular season games. He has a record of 22-9, 67.8% completion percentage, 57 touchdowns, 23 interceptions, a rating of 106.3. His 17-game average is, and the completion percentage and the rating is the same. He would average 4,015 yards per 17-game season, 28 touchdowns, and 11 interceptions. Brock has essentially played 2 full years in the league. 2022 was 5 games. 2024 has been 10 games. And I think that's something like 20. I don't know if I have it written down. Let me just check my notes if I had put this down. Yeah, so 2023, he threw for 4,280 yards, 31 touchdowns, 11 interceptions. 4th in MVP voting. If you combine 2022 and 2024, that's 15 games total. So 1 less game than his 2023 season, 3,987 yards, 26 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions. Again, 1 less game. But so this is the snapshot of Brock Purdy. And what I pulled up was 4 players, and that you can get this from Spotrac.com, overthecap.com, and again, profootballreference.com in terms of every one of these quarterbacks' career completion percentage, yards, touchdown averages, and then what their 17-game average is. And now here are 4 quarterbacks that are averaging $51 million a year or more. And you guys, I'm not going to go over this in detail, but you have Jordan Love, who got his contract of $55 million a year before the season started, which was based on 9 good games in the regular season, had a very good playoff game against Dallas, and then shit the bed against San Francisco in the divisional round. So his $55 million a year contract was based on 9 regular season games. And his completion percentage, his touchdown interception ratio, his rating, and then over a 17-game average, all worse than Brock's. So anyone out there that's telling you or telling me or telling the ether or the internet universe, social media universe, that Jordan Love is worth $55 million a year, but Brock Purdy's not, you have to ask why. Because of Jordan Love's 9-game sample from 2023 and Brock Purdy's prior to this season, 1.5-year sample with 2 deep playoff runs and a better playoff record and playoff touchdown to interception ratio than anybody on this list. The other 4 quarterbacks. Jordan Love is worth it, but Brock Purdy's not. Come on. This is not me being a homer. You can have an opinion, guys. Or not you guys, but people out there can have an opinion, but you got to base it on facts. And there's even that thing called the eye test that Purdy passes. Right? It's not, Yes, he isn't strongest arm, fastest, high draft pick, but he makes wow plays with his legs. It's not sexy, the throws that he makes sometimes, because efficiency or being highly efficient is a dirty word. It's not sexy. But Jordan Love, let's go to Trevor Lawrence. Again, another $55 million a year quarterback. Terrible record. Yes, he had Urban Meyer was his coach for 1 year. But do we think that Urban Meyer did irreparable damage to Trevor Lawrence? Are we going to say that Trevor Lawrence doesn't have weapons when you have Travis Etienne at running back and Evan Ingram at tight end, Gabe Davis and Christian Kirk, among others, at receiver? Guys, if you're a number one draft pick and there's this much potential radiating in his body, shouldn't he be able to will his team to a better record than 22-37? Shouldn't he be more dynamic? Shouldn't he have better stats? Again, completion percentage, touchdown interception ratio, rating worse than Jordan Love, more than 20 rating points worse than Brock Purdy, and a 17-game average, all the same, worse. But Trevor Lawrence is worth $55 million a year. Why? Because that Twitter idiot said he was a first-round pick and draft picks matter, and he's got more potential and this, that. He's been in the league 2 years longer than Brock Purdy. He hasn't realized any of this potential yet. He's injured now, wasn't having a great season. Drafted him in fantasy to begin the year, dropped him within the first month. Trevor Lawrence ain't it, guys. But this is a data point. As is Tua from Miami. Little lower, $53 million a year. He's played in 58 games, has a winning record, 36-22. The only quarterback here that surpasses anything that's in Brock Purdy's red rectangle is Tua's 17-game average. He would be averaging 4,080 yards, 4,080 passing yards in a 17-game season versus Brock Purdy's 4,015. Now, Miami's is a good running team under Mike McDaniel, but they throw it more than the Niners do. So I'm not surprised about that difference in passing yards. But the completion percentage, nearly identical. The touchdown to interception ratio, nearly identical over a 17-game average. And the rating, 8 points lower than Brock Purdy. And obviously, the same when it comes to his career averages. And for shits and giggles, I threw in Jalen Hurts because it's like, all right, let's throw in a mobile quarterback, right? And there's no running stats here. Although, funny enough, Brock Purdy does not have the difference in rushing yards between Brock Purdy and Jalen Hurts is a lot closer than you may think. Now, Hurts gets the cheap tush-push touchdowns from inside the 2 and 3, but he's a quarterback making $51 million a year. He's played 62 games, has a good record, good winning record, 43-19. Completion percentage, lower. TD to interception ratio, lower. Rating, QB rating overall, much lower. And over a 17-game season, he's a 19-9 quarterback. Touchdowns, interceptions, whereas Brock is a 28-11. So I'll leave this up here for another 10 seconds or so as I recap. These are data points, guys. If you think any one of these quarterbacks, Love's got weapons. His receivers might not be household names like as much as the Niners receivers are, but is Debo a 1,000-yard receiver anymore? No. Between, was it Jaden Reed and Romeo Dobbs and Tucker Kraft at tight end and Josh Jacobs having a really good year on the ground. And Jordan Love, I believe, is still leading the league in interceptions, and he missed, 2.5 games. So he does put the ball in harm's way much more than Brock Purdy does. But these are 4 players, 4 data points, 4 quarterbacks that are making between $51 and $55 million a year. And this is factual, because here are the numbers. Factual. Not one of them has the resume that Brock Purdy does. Jalen Hurts comes the closest because he's been to a Super Bowl. All right. He was an MVP finalist. But the numbers, and he's more of a threat running the ball. I get it. But the numbers are just not there. This is why, guys, Brock Purdy is going to be making somewhere in the 50s. And if his representation argues above Jordan Love and Trevor Lawrence and he gets $56 million a year, based on this, can you really argue it? And no, it's not all numbers. I've said the eye test, right? We've watched enough games that Brock Purdy is a leader. He has the it factor. He can put the team on his back, as evidenced by the Packer and Lion playoff games last year. This year has been a revolving door of injuries, players being in and out. They have not had the same offense on the field once this season as they had last season. Continuity matters, and same with the defense too. Continuity matters. All right, I'm back. But what I wanted to just finish off this by saying is, if anyone out there, I'm not arguing that Brock is Mahomes or Josh Allen or Joe Burrow or Lamar Jackson. And if you want to throw, Justin Herbert in there, you want to throw Matt Stafford in there because a little bit older in terms of pure quarterback play, I'm not going to argue that, right? But the four players that I mentioned on that screen, Love, Lawrence, Tua, and Jalen Hurts, that's the next tier down. And Brock is part of that next tier. And you can throw in Prescott, even though he's making an absurd $60 million a year. You can throw in Jared Goff, who's having a very good season this season with a 5 interception game thrown in there. And has been a very efficient quarterback the past several years and one really good year in Los Angeles before he got traded. You can throw Kyler Murray in there. If you want to throw CJ Stroud in, I still think it's a little bit early. Fine, you can throw him in there. But that's the ballpark, guys. Any which way you want to quantify what Brock means to the Niners, how he compares to other quarterbacks, that is where he is. Brock had a great season last year. The entire Niner offense had a great season last year. That might be the high watermark. But because he's going to get paid $50+ million and he has a career average of 26 touchdowns and 12 interceptions or whatever I said, or that's if you're comparing his rookie year and this year, which hasn't been great, 26 touchdowns and 12 interceptions. And now he's making $53 million a year with an upcoming contract extension. What do you think he should be doing? Throwing 38 touchdowns and 8 interceptions every year? It's not realistic. Or because IU got extended, he had a 1,300-yard season last year, that he should be a 1,600-yard wide receiver. That's not realistic either, especially in Shanahan's offense with the other weapons that they have that have been kind of having a down year. You want to, if you're paying a player, in my opinion, if Brock gets that 52, 3, 4, whatever $1 million a year contract, then he should every year maintain high 20s, low 30s in touchdowns and low teens in interceptions. That would be my expectation. Not something that blows it out of the water. Not Patrick Mahomes' 50 touchdown year from whatever it was, 2018, 2019. That's unrealistic. Purdy's going to get paid. Purdy's going to get paid in the 50s. It will have an impact on the cap, not as significant as a lot of people are thinking or saying. The Niners are not as old of a team as people are thinking or saying, and I'm going to get into that next podcast. Brock is one of the main reasons why the Niners made the Super Bowl this year. And he's actually one of the reasons why the Niners were 5-5 before he missed last game. I think he's covering up some deficiencies and inefficiencies on offense and doing what he can to keep the Niners in games with the defense struggling to close out and the offense struggling to close out too. And Brock does have a hand in that. He does. But without Brock, this is a 2 or 3 win team. And they have no chance in Buffalo without him. Now let's quickly just touch upon injuries in terms of injury status of players on the team now. Then we're going to get into a comparison. So Fred Warner, it was announced this week, fractured his ankle in week 4 against the Patriots, has been playing every week on a fractured ankle and getting pain-killing injections. The dude's a warrior. The play obviously has fallen off at least the past 4 or 5 weeks. We know the reason why, for whatever it's worth. In terms of going into this Sunday night game at Buffalo, Brock Purdy was very limited at a Wednesday practice, threw a couple passes very lightly and then kind of simulated the rest of the practice. Bosa, it was very limited. Trent Williams was on a scooter, couldn't even put weight on his ankle or knee. They did not practice. I don't envision any one of those 3 playing. Diamador Lenore didn't practice due to his knee colliding with another player, not a sprain or anything, but a deep bruise. Aaron Banks at left guard and Jordan Elliott at defensive tackle. They're in the concussion protocol. Who knows how that's going to go? Jacob Cowing, wide receiver, out of the concussion protocol. He was a full practice, and as was Charvarius Ward. So he'll be back probably in the starting lineup. And lastly, Dre Greenlaw coming back from the torn Achilles in last year's Super Bowl. The Niners opened his 21-day window. He was a limited participant in practice. He will not be playing this week. They have 21 days to determine if he's going to play at all again this season. Just remember, guys, the Niners opened offensive lineman John Feliciano's window a couple weeks ago. The knee didn't respond. He went back to IR. By the time Greenlaw is maybe ready to play, the Niners might lose another 2 games in a row and be really out of it in terms of the playoffs or the NFC West. So there's no guarantee at all that you see Dre Greenlaw with the 49ers in 2024. And since he's a free agent after this season, there's no guarantee you see Dre Greenlaw again in a 49ers uniform, although I would love to see him play. I would love to see how different this defense looks, the run defense, the energy, the enthusiasm, the ferocity would look with him this season. And I hope he would be open to coming back and, like, say, a 1-year prove-it deal. Who knows what he's going to get in free agency. By the time free agency rolls around and obviously next training camp and regular season, he's going to be 100% fully healthy. So leg's not going to be an issue, but him being a Niner or not next year is very much in doubt. So let's stick with the injury theme. So again, and again, thank you, social media people, because it makes me, one, it practices my patience, because people are so stupid, and to not respond to every single idiot, it does practice like my patience. I think it's making me, hopefully it's making me a more patient person. So thank you, all you morons out there, for that. But it also made me, think of, people that are saying, oh, the injuries aren't an excuse. It's not like it was in 2020. And it made me go back and say, all right, let's actually compare this year to 2020. And by comparing, what I did was I went back to 2020 and this year and looked at games missed by players that were playing a moderate to prominent role on the team, people that were getting meaningful snaps. All right. Now, 2024, you had people missing a bunch of games. Heavy hitters like Nick Bosa missed 14 games after tearing his knee up at MetLife Stadium against the Jets. Richard Sherman at corner missed 11 games. Jimmy missed 10. Debo missed 9. Jaguaski Tart missed 9. Kittle and Mostert missed 8. And there were a couple other players that missed games as well. This actually includes also Solomon Thomas at D tackle also tore his knee up the same game Nick Bosa did. He missed 14 games as well. If you want, I don't know if you want to call him a prominent or an integral or even a moderately prominent member of that 2020 defensive line, but I'm going to include him in this game count or games missed count. So in 2020, 89 games were missed by players who played important snaps for this team. Obviously, a bunch of starters, a bunch of stars, players that would have impacted the game and would have improved the Niners, I believe, 6-10 record. And people out there think that 2024 is like, oh, just not a big deal. You have someone like Javon Hargrave missing. He's going to miss 14 games when it's all said and done. Greenlaw is going to miss at least 11. Ayuk, 10. McCaffrey missed 6. Yetur Gross-Matos, McCaffrey missed 8, Yetur Gross-Matos missed 6. Kevin Givens, Kalia Davis, Charvarius Ward all missed 4. Then you had, Debo, Kittle, Jennings missing a couple games. Purdy and Bosa and Williams have missed a game so far this year. Talanoa Hufanga is probably not going to come back. He's going to be missing 15 games or less. So in total, those players that I listed, rattled off, and we would say all players that play important snaps, either very, very important, like a Hargrave, an Ayuk, a Dre, a Debo, Kittle, Bosa, Purdy, missing 1 game. So far, 85 games have been missed by players who have played prominent snaps. And that's not even counting defensive end Drake Jackson, who's out for all 17. I didn't count him. That would have brought it up to 102. And guys, we still have 5 games to go. If Purdy, Bosa, and Williams all miss this week's game at Buffalo, you're at 88, which is 1 game fewer than 2020 in terms of games missed. Injuries, it's hard to say injuries are an excuse. The word excuse, you're looking for an excuse if you're using the word excuse, right? But it's a reason. It's a factor why this team has looked so disjointed on the offensive and defensive side of the balls, in addition to Nick Sorensen coming on, to man the defense. They're not finishing. They're getting 3 instead of 7. They're not finishing on the defensive side. They're not holding a team to 3 or 0 instead of 7. 2024 is just as bad as 2020, guys. And there's still 5 games to go. 6 games to go, excuse me, because I was thinking ahead beyond the Buffalo game. Still 6 games to go for more of these missed games to rack up. And they are going to get above the 89 game count from the 2020 team. It's just a matter of how far above are they going to go. So let's just some stats and news and notes. Let's talk about the team as a whole. Interestingly enough, the 49ers have the second best yardage differential in the entire league behind the Philadelphia Eagles. The Niners have garnered or gotten 883 more yards on offense than they've given up on defense. They're averaging 80 yards per game more than their opponent. Philly's at like 114. They've turned it around the past, 5 or 6 weeks on that, whatever 7-8 game winning streak, whatever it may be. But I might have said it a couple of minutes ago and I stole my own thunder. It just goes to show how much they're not finishing on offense, either at the end of the game or driving. Red zone, one of the worst, if not the worst in the NFL. They're certainly bottom 3. They're getting 3 instead of 7. And defensively, while things look okay-ish in the first half, except for last week against Green Bay, and then it peters out in the third quarter, and the fourth quarter is a bit of a shit show, they're not holding teams to 3 instead of 7. They're not holding teams to no points at all. They're not getting drives snuffed out in opponent's territory to force a punt. When teams need to have a scoring drive against San Francisco in the second half, but specifically the fourth quarter, they get it. And they usually get a touchdown. They're bottom 3 in the league in terms of points allowed in the fourth quarter. And under Steve Wilkes last year, they were number 1. Let's go back to Brock. I know we talked about Brock, with the contract, everyone thinking about him as a dink and dunker. 37.7% of Brock's passing yards are the result of yards after the catch. That is the lowest in the NFL. And who are some of the highest? Mahomes, Allen, Burrow, Stroud's like in the top 15. So Brock he's pushing the ball downfield. They're doing it through the air. If anyone's going to say, well, Brock was a yak merchant, he's getting cheap yards last year, he's not getting them this year at all. And if you want to say he's having a down year because of it, or, the internet doctors saying, well, there's something wrong with his shoulder and it's probably related to the elbow. Are you kidding me? You don't know shit from Shinola, dude. I don't know when he heard it against Seattle. Was it diving for the end zone when he scored that rushing touchdown? We don't know. He's got shoulder soreness. Hopefully it works itself out. And if it doesn't, so what? And they put him on IR. Can't really say that this season was heading towards, a playoff spot, even though they're mathematically still in it. It's not looking great, right? It's not looking great. Now, Kittle's looked really good. Kittle's got a Pro Football Focus grade of 90.8, obviously out of 100. That's number 1 among all tight ends. He's leading all tight ends in touchdowns with 8. Number 1 in tight ends for contested catches with 9. He's got 642 yards. That's second most in the league. And his rating when targeted is 138. That's number 3 in the NFL. Kittle also has a league-leading 15 receptions in the red zone. I don't know if that's overall or among tight ends. He's only got 1 drop on 58 targets. And Kittle will be a Niner for the foreseeable future. He will be part of the 10-plus year club. He will get extended. It'll lower his cap hit by up to $10 million at the absolute most. And Kittle's got some great job security. Kyle cannot develop a second tight end behind him, so Kittle is not going anywhere. People, the Grant Cohns of the world, Kittle, before last year, even this year, Kittle's washed, and now they're basically on their knees blowing Kittle because of the great season that he had last season. He's doing really well this season as well. He's a player, along with Ayuk, before he got hurt last season, that Brock elevated. that Brock gave Kittle, two of his best statistical seasons, aside from his second year when he led the league and led the tight ends. He broke the tight end record, in receiving with over 1,300 yards until Travis Kelce broke it the following year. He has operated and produced much better under Brock Purdy than he ever did under Jimmy Garoppolo. Remember the year 2018 where he broke that record? It was basically Nick Mullins quarterbacking the whole year because Jimmy tore his ACL at week 3 in Kansas City. So let's transition offense still. So Kyle talked about McCaffrey's production to the media. Here was his quote. I think Christian is doing a hell of a job, but to think him coming back in week 8 and not being able to do anything the last 9 months or whatever it is, to think he's just going to be in MVP form is a very unrealistic expectation. Logical to hear it, to say the words, but it leads you to, why are you playing him so heavily since he came back 3 weeks ago? Why is Jordan Mason not in the mix other than 6 carries since McCaffrey's been back? Why didn't you ease McCaffrey back as a second or third down option? Would help out in pass protection, right? On specific passing downs as an outlet, but leave the early rundown specifically to Mason and maybe some for Isaac Guerendo. Now, Kyle and McCaffrey did say the same thing in terms of, well, for McCaffrey, substitutions aren't up to him. It seems like it's up to the running back coach, Bobby Turner. But if McCaffrey's gas, you'll see him kind of do this and he'll come out. But that's a rarity. And they both did say that situationally the past couple of weeks, they had to come back against Tampa. They were ahead, but then, fell behind against Seattle. And that game was close. And then obviously the Green Bay game, they only ran it, 14 or 16 times. So situationally, they needed to keep McCaffrey in there in terms of a viable pass catching threat out of the backfield. But it just doesn't seem to, and Kyle said, and I think his quote was something like, we're not a 3 running back team. We're not a team that goes, rotates 3 running backs that a lot of teams do. Well, Kyle, you're not even a team that rotates one other running back other than your starter. He's like, we're a team that when we have an entrenched starter, we're just going to give the ball to that guy. And at least he was true to that. When Mason was starting, Guerendo wasn't really getting any carries. Patrick Taylor, when he was on the roster, wasn't really getting any carries. So at least Kyle is consistent. But it's stubborn consistency. It's stubborn, almost stupidity, especially with McCaffrey coming back. And you guys have seen it on the 6 runs, 5 of the 6 runs that Mason had, because the one run was a fumble and he wound up losing 10 yards when an offensive lineman jumped on it. What was that, against Green Bay or Seattle? I think it was against Green Bay this past week. He's the more explosive runner. He's finding the holes, finding the burst, running with more power, running with more decisiveness. That very well could be just because of those 5 plays were blocked better than everything that McCaffrey's, been trying to find room for. There's the possibility of that, but Mason just looks fresh. Mason looks like he's obviously been in the game this season. He's in the rhythm of the offense more than McCaffrey is. And if Shanahan's philosophy somewhat is, well, let's force feed McCaffrey to get him back in the flow, you can understand that to a point, but the running game has suffered with McCaffrey in it as opposed to Jordan Mason. Kyle is not going to change anything. He should, if the weather's going to be, if it's going to be as cold, like in the high 20s, low 30s, there's not going to be, I don't think, any precipitation. Take some of the heat off of Brandon Allen, right? Hand it off. If you want to give it to McCaffrey 20 times, fine. You want to hand it off to Mason 10 or 15 times, fine. Say McCaffrey 15, Mason 10, and give Guerendo a couple carry, whatever. Pound it at Buffalo, right? Do not let Brandon Allen be the reason why you lose or the reason why you need to win. Buffalo's a 9-2 team, but they can be how. We're going to go over some of the stats. Let's get into that now. Niners at Bills, Sunday Night Football. At least it wasn't flexed out for us, Niner fans. Bills are favored by 7. I think right now it's a pretty safe bet. Take the Bills, given the points. Obviously, Josh Allen have a very good MVP caliber year. 18 touchdowns and 5 picks. It's not like it's an overwhelmingly great differential. He's got another 5 rushing on the ground. James Cook, who's missed sometimes, still has about 600 yards on the ground, 10 rushing touchdowns. At receiver, it's Khalil Shakir, about 600 yards, 2 touchdowns. Rookie Keon Coleman out of Florida State, 417 yards and 2 scores. Tight end Dalton Kincaid is hurt. Doesn't look like he's playing again. And defensively, they have 27 sacks. It's not like a team that gets to the quarterback tremendously, close to what the Niners have done. Defensive end Greg Rousseau leads the charge with 5.5. AJ Epinepsa has 5. And the immortal Von Miller has 4 interceptions. They've taken the ball away 13 times, at least through the air. 6 players on the team have 2 picks. They're a 9-2 team, but they're middling when it comes to yardage. So they're 13th overall in terms of offense, 13th against the pass, 13th passing, garnering 226 a game, 11th rushing, 119 yards a game, but they are 3rd in points scored at 29. Defensively, they're 15th overall. They're 14th against the pass, allowing 210. They're 13th against the run, allowing 119, but they're 7th in points allowed, allowing 19.5. And the turnover differential, Buffalo is tops in the league, plus 14. The Niners are even at 0. The Bills are the better team, guys. I'm not making a case here for why San Francisco could win this game. I don't think there's any case to be made with Brock out, even if Bosa and Trent Williams play, which I don't think they will. But with Brock out, Brandon Allen or Josh Dobbs, I don't think there's any chance that they win this game. This is how vital Brock is to the offense. And yes, it basically any starting quarterback, you're going to struggle with your backup. And there's a big drop off between Brock Purdy and Brandon Allen or Josh Dobbs. Brandon Allen has already been tapped to start should Brock Purdy not be able to. And depending on when you're watching or listening to this, you probably have that answer already. I think Josh Dobbs, I've said it last podcast and on another podcast, he might be the reason why he loses you a game. He might be the one that's going to throw 2 or 3 picks, but he has mobility. There's an energy about him. He could create his own plays, right? Jumpstart the offense somewhat. Brandon Allen is a statue in the pocket. He threw a pick against Green Bay, went through Debo's hands, got sacked because his, slipped, tried to gather himself, ball was knocked out of his arm. So Brandon Allen is responsible for 2 interceptions. I don't care that Debo dropped it or not. Brandon Allen was the one that threw it. If the ball placement was a little bit different, if it was a little bit lower, wouldn't have gone through Debo's hands. Might have gone off his face mask and clanged straight down, or hit his chest and went straight down. The high throw, trying to thread the needle, was part of, I don't say part of the reason why it was intercepted, but if the ball placement was a little bit different, it might not have been a pick. Not blaming Brandon Allen, but he was the facilitator of 2 turnovers in which Green Bay had short fields and scored. But even though, listen, Buffalo's 9-2, they beat the Chiefs. Their 2 losses were at Baltimore and at Houston. This wouldn't have been an insurmountable game at all if San Francisco was fully healthy, or at least, Ayuk's done for the year, but anybody else that might not play this week plays. Mainly Brock, Bosa, Trent Williams. We'll see if Demo can go, and Jordan Elliott and Aaron Banks. Hopefully they can all go. It's interesting. The Bills give up a lot of yards. They don't garner a lot of yards. Again, they're middling. They're a middling team gaining yards on offense and a middling team in stopping yards. But they're top 3 in scoring and top 3 in scoring defense. They are the exact opposite of the 49ers. The 49ers put up a lot of yards. They're still a top 2, top 3 offense, and they're a top 10 defense in terms of yards allowed. And they are literally statistically better than Buffalo in every statistical yardage metric. Total offense, passing offense, rushing offense, total defense, passing defense, rushing defense, but severely or significantly behind the Bills in terms of points scored and points allowed. And it goes again to finishing. The Niners not finishing on offense when they need to late in the games, or when they need to in the red zone, converting 3s into 7s, and obviously not getting stops when they need to on defense. Given all that, the Brandon Allen factor, they are who they are right now. They're an average or slightly below average team. Playing a backup quarterback or number 3 quarterback isn't going to change that. I think Buffalo wins this game pretty handily. I have them 30-13, so not quite as disgusting a loss as it was in Green Bay. San Francisco's hopes getting something big on special teams, and not having Eric Saubert get called for a hold in which that play could have not turned the game around, but made it closer. They still would have lost, but made it closer. Don't turn the ball over. If they don't turn the ball over, this game could be within 10-ish. Buffalo's not a great running team. Listen, even with Josh Allen contributing to running the ball himself, they're only averaging 119 on the ground. Not tremendous. Now watch them pound the Niners for about $1.75, and they're giving up 119 on the ground. So the Niners, if Brock was playing, the running game, I don't want to say would get back on track, but probably could average that in the 115, 120, 125 range. But Buffalo could stack the box now, take McCaffrey away. Kyle's going to take Jordan Mason away himself and force Brandon Allen to beat them, and he won't be able to. That's why I think the Niners at full strength, this would have been, even if they were 5-6, if they were full strength or significantly healthier, 5-6 team going into Buffalo, I think they could have made it a very interesting game. This game might be interesting through the first quarter, maybe mid-second quarter. But again, this is going to be another Sorensen pure plain vanilla special where they're going to come at Josh Allen with 4. He's a top 3 quarterback in this league. He's going to pick the defense apart. He's going to pick the zone apart. And if nothing's there, he's going to beat them with his legs. And that's not to say that you have to blitz Josh Allen every down, every play, or even 50% of the time, but they need to come after him. Josh Allen is a bona fide difference maker, a bona fide MVP candidate. Like I said, top 2 or 3 quarterback in the NFL, dangerous arm and legs. They can't just let him sit back. You can't play passively against someone that can play so aggressively like Josh Allen can. Can Josh Allen have a historic Josh Allen performance of, maybe, throwing a couple in the air that get intercepted, or, rolling to his right, rolling to his left, throwing back across his body? We'll call it a Jordan Love playoff special, and gifting the Niners a turnover. It's entirely possible. It is. But Josh Allen has gotten better once the offensive coordinator, and I'm blanking on his name, I apologize, took the ball out of his hands more and started giving it to the running backs more. That made the Buffalo Bills a better team, a better offense, a more efficient offense, and a more risk-averse offense. Because Josh Allen, maybe not so much in the postseason, he cleaned that stuff up, but he would make head-scratching throws, and he did a bunch last year where it's like, dude, just throw it away. Just take the sack. Why are you forcing it? He's got it in him. He's always had it in him. He'll always probably have it in him. You can't really completely coach that out of him. The way you get it out of him is by taking the ball out of his hands. And James Cook and Ray Davis at running back, who was filling in for Cook for a couple of games when Cook was hurt, or at least one game, is a step in that direction. All things not even being equal, all things being as they are, a banged up Niner team, night game, inclement weather, not having your starting quarterback, your left tackle, or your best D end, take Buffalo given the 7. Now you just got to root for it. The Niners get to 5-7. Listen, the season's not going anywhere, but all is not lost mathematically. I'm not talking emotionally or, but this and that. Mathematically, all is not lost, especially if Arizona is going to Minnesota. That's a very losable game for them. The Seahawks are going to the Jets. The Jets, this could be one of those games where the Jets surprise you and look good. Seattle's not a world beater. Seattle doesn't like to run the ball. The Jets can't stop the runs. That might be a wash. Maybe the secondary can control Geno Smith, and maybe Aaron Rodgers has some glimpses of the Aaron Rodgers of old, and not beyond the realm of possibility the Jets pull the upset. The Rams are at the Saints. That's probably the most favorable matchup of the 3 for an NFC West team. And even if the Rams win that game, they would only be 1 game in front of San Francisco with 5 to go. So Cardinals could be 6-6, the Seahawks could be 6-6, and the Rams could be 6-6, and the Niners 5-7, 1 game back in the West. I'm just doing the math for you guys. They're in it till they're not. They got the Bears coming up, and as long as Matt Eberflus is still the head coach, they suck. They got the Rams coming up at home. You drop this to Buffalo, and they're probably going to drop it. 2 winnable games at home. They get to 7-7 with 3 games left and the rest of the NFC West, or no one in the NFC West pulls away. It could make for a very interesting last 3 games of the season at Miami, at home for Detroit, and at home for Arizona. But make no mistake, they will be 5-7, getting back on the plane, heading back to Santa Clara on late Sunday night. That concludes the 49ers podcast for this week. Again, I want to thank you. The Thanksgiving week, Thanksgiving Day as I'm recording this, thank you all. If you have listened and watched this far or have watched at any point during the video, presently or in the past, or hopefully in the future, thank you so much. It really does mean the world to me. I appreciate it. Whatever you are doing between now and then, I'm sure of a lot of it's going to be Black Friday shopping, whether in stores or online. I can hear everybody's credit card gasping for air as it's, preparing to be overloaded. But whatever you're doing between now and we speak again, more than likely Monday, enjoy the games. Hopefully the Niner game is competitive. Stay happy, healthy, and safe, and we'll talk soon. Take care, everybody.